And we're going to get into overreaction number one, boys. Tennessee blows out LSU. I said it was a trap game. We talked about this last week with both of you guys because they play Alabama next week. Alabama comes to Knoxville. The second time Knoxville is hosting College Game Day in less than a month. Hendon Hooker looks like the best quarterback in the country right now. So here's the overreaction. Tennessee is going to make the college football playoff. As simple as that. Felder, do you buy that?
You know what? I'm not going to be in for a penny, in for a pound, but I can see it. I can see it happening. If they split those games, especially, and let's look at the numbers, right? If they lose to Alabama but beat Georgia, a Georgia team, by the way, that has they're still figuring out who they are. If they split those and find a way to, or you know what? It's better if they beat Alabama and lose to Georgia. Then Georgia goes to the SEC championship game, plays Alabama. Tennessee's just hanging out as an 11-1 team. Now they've got a chance. It's better to lose to Georgia. But I'm not going to put them all the way in the playoff yet, so I'm not going to go that far. I am going to say that I love what this team does: the speed and the space, the Hyatt, the Tillman, the forced declaration. And I think that the biggest thing for me was in the run game. And Trevor, I want you, Trevor, get in here, because as a quarterback, when you put guys all the way outside the numbers, and then the defense has to declare, which is what Clint Sterner talked about before. Remember, Greg? Clint Sterner was talking about you have to declare what you're doing when they're that far outside. Trevor, if you go into a game and that's what your plan is and they have to declare, how comfortable does it make you? Because when I look at Hendon Hooker, what I see is comfort.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker is very comfortable. And I've got personal experience with this because Josh Heupel, the man calling the plays, the man calling the shots, was my QB coach for 3 years at Oklahoma. He's the reason that I became the player that I became. Now, I didn't get to the level of Hendon Hooker, but I played a lot better football than if I didn't have Josh Heupel molding me into the player that I was. And yes, it's about schematics, to your point, Felder. Spreading it out, getting a good look, making an athlete have space, but also be able to see the field. That is truly helpful to Hendon Hooker, and it plays well to how he operates, how he sees the field. But I'll say this from personal experience. He's so prepared for each and every one of these games because of the process that Josh Heupel puts him through. I remember even in the offseason, we would come in and Hype would call a meeting and we'd walk in, think we're just going to watch some film and do that. We'd walk in the door and he'd hand us a packet about this thick. And it was nothing but a bunch of blitzes drawn up to all of our different pass protections. And it was a mad dash. And he would say, hey, whoever finishes first and gets the most right, he's going to be our starter this year. Boom, 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 boom. We're going through. And at first we're like, what are we doing, man? This is overkill. This is overkill. But by the end, I guarantee you what, we go out on the practice field. Oh, yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that look before. Oh, I've seen that blitz before. Oh, I've drawn that up 500 times. I know exactly what's coming there. So it gives you freedom of the mind. Now see the coverages. See it all spread out, to your point, Felder, and go and operate and be the athlete that I want to be. I think Josh Heupel is a huge piece to Hendon Hooker's success, and obviously a huge piece calling the shots to what Tennessee has done thus far.
So, Trevor, obviously you have personal experience with Heupel, and I'd love to even hear more about this as we talk about how Tennessee turns the page now in the biggest week of their season, right before they host Alabama with everything on the line in that game. But I have a very simple I'm almost going to oversimplify the question here. Heupel's second year at Tennessee, 7-6 last season. Hendon Hooker was their quarterback for the majority of that season. What's the difference from last year's Heupel's Vols team to how they've taken this jump so quickly? Because this hasn't been necessarily a 500 season up to, okay, maybe a 9-3. Maybe it's building up. They've gone from a 500 team that barely made a bowl game to we're talking seriously about them being a favorite to make the college football playoff this year. What do you think the biggest reason for that is?
I'll go first, Felder. I really do think it's Josh Heupel. And it's the relationship building, it's the culture building that goes on behind the scenes. If you look at his track, he was at Oklahoma, seeing a lot of success, and I would imagine that he thought that he was the head coach in waiting, and that he was going to follow Bob Stoops, and he was never going to get out of the Crimson and Cream. But he's gone on this journey. He goes to Utah State. They play really well on offense under him. Then he goes to Missouri, Drew Lock. They put up a bunch of numbers. Then he goes to Central Florida, very successful, a lot of big numbers on offense. And now he's here at Tennessee. He inherits a team that I think had a lot of scars, scabs, and open wounds. And he's just bandaged them all up. And I think he's been extremely intentional throughout this offseason, getting the buy-in of every single player that walks into that locker room. And it starts with the quarterback. And that's why I think that a coach like Josh Heupel, even though he's really, really good at calling the shots as a head guy, will always be present in that QB room because he understands that room permeates the rest of the team. If you've got a guy that buys into the system and is playing at that position, it will permeate into your culture, and it's the recipe for success. So to do that in 1 year or now 2 years, unbelievable. But he's had the track record that has shown it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to be like, I'll dumb it down. Trust those guys in that locker room. Trust them. Because here's the thing, and Trevor, you know this as well as I do. If a coach comes out and tells you, "Hey, why don't you line up outside the numbers?" You're going to be like, "Well, nobody's ever asked me to do this before. Why would I line up outside the numbers?" That's only a one-way go. And then he's like, no. We've got a thing that we're working on, and this is going to get us to where we want to go. And you got to trust me. And those guys trust him. Hooker obviously trusts him. And then with Hooker, as you mentioned, his buy-in leads to Tillman, Hyatt buy-in, which leads to the offensive line being like, oh, all we have to do is this, and then we'll be okay. And then the biggest thing for me as a defensive guy is watching that defense show up this weekend. Those guys, they got after it. I mean, the sacks, the aggressive football play that they had, like the aggressive plays that they made was really, really fun to watch. So this is a team, and they use speed and space on the defensive side of the ball, which I don't even know that wasn't even usually a thing, but they're dictating on the defensive side the way that they're dictating on the offensive side. So I'm very excited. What do they have? The next 4 weeks, they have 3 huge games. And that's no disrespect to Tennessee Martin, but we've got Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky. So let's see what happens. And realistic, like worst case scenario in my mind, at least, this could be a 10-2 football team. 10-2 puts them in a New Year's Six bowl, right? 10-2, like if Georgia and Bama go to the playoff, they become the SEC representative. And this is a team that it's all there on their racket. And answer your original question, Greg, like to answer your original question, how did they go from 7-6 to this? It's all trust. Mm-hmm. Football's a game where you have to trust that you got to trust the man that's next to you. And you also have to trust what the coach is telling you to do. And I've been on teams where you either don't trust the guy that's next to you, so you overcompensate. When you overcompensate, that gets you a gap over. When you're a gap over, there's a huge hole for somebody to run through because you're worried about this guy not doing his job. And if you don't trust what the coach is calling, everybody starts doing their own thing. And if you start doing your own thing, again, you're a gap over, or you're a gap late, or you're not in position. But this is a team that looks like they trust what their coaching staff is asking them to do. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, it's extremely high praise for a guy who I think deserves it at this point in Josh Heupel. Hendon Hooker, I think it's very fair to throw him right in the mix with the CJ Strouds of the world right now in the Heisman conversation. Half a season left. We got to get there. Can I
ask you a question? Can I ask one more question related to that point, Greg? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. The success that Josh Heupel has had this first half of the season, if he loses 2 out of the next 4, which is pretty likely,
yeah,
do we bury him? Do we send him to the grave? Or is he still doing great things? Is it okay? It's Bama, it's Georgia. If he beats Kentucky and UT Martin, are we still talking super, super highly about the Tennessee Volunteers? Or does it matter how bad they get beat if they get beat?
I will still continue to talk about him highly.
I agree with that.
These guys got a lot of runway. Let's not forget. This is what is year 2, year 3, year 2, 3,
2,
year 2. They got a lot of runway. Okay, they got a lot of runway in terms of Saban's been there since 2008, and Kirby's been there for. Was he been there 6 years? They got runway. They built this. This is a guy who's doing it with other people's guys, and he's still in transfers, and he's figuring out a way to make it work. So for me, I will continue. Again, if they go 10-2, like Trevor, what are we going to do if they go 10-2 as a team, and they end up in? I'm not going to pretend like I know which bowls are making up the playoff this year. Greg, off the top of your head, which bowls make the playoff this year?
Oh my God!
Right, exactly. So that's my point. No, we're not paying attention to it. But if they go to, whether it's the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl or it's the Chick-fil-A Bowl, whatever it is, if they go to one of those bowls, then you're in the catbird seat for whatever comes up next. That's all I'm saying. So yes, he still gets credit from me.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Let's say they don't blow a easy one, right? To the no disrespect to UT Martin, and I think there's a lot of basketball school fans out there that were just happy you threw them in with Alabama and Georgia in that statement, Felder, but they'll take it right now. But if they just take care of business at this point, whether that's 10-2, whether that's 9-3 with a loss to Kentucky, I think everybody still feels great about Tennessee.